Greetings, everyone. My name is Kenton Kirby. I am the Director of Practice here at the Center for Court Innovation in New York City. And today's panel is called Engaging Participants, People-Centered Practices, and Building Inclusive and Culturally Responsive Programming. We have an amazing panel lined up to speak with you all and talk about their experiences from different vantage points. First, we have Judge Linda Cooke, Mankinta Holloway, and Ionna Jimenez. So I was actually going to do their intros, but I figured I'd let them tell their stories better than I would. So the first question I want to ask you all is just when we think about doing people-centered work, it's about ourselves. We're also involved in this. We're not machines. We are humans. And just like we're working with folks, we're all imperfect in different ways. One arm is longer than the other. One eye is bigger than the other. It's all about imperfections. We all bring those. So I also want to acknowledge that the work that we do is very hard. It's not easy, and it's not for everyone. So my first question is also tied into your intros. I want you to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're at, what your role is in your respective parts of the country, and also tell us your why and your how. Why do you do what you do? And how do you sustain yourself in it? How do you keep yourself doing the work that you've been doing all these years? So anyone can start.
Well, I can start. Hello, everyone. I'm Ionna Jimenez. I'm the project director of the Brownsville Community Justice Center, which is a project site of the Center for Court Innovation, located in Brownsville, Brooklyn. What's my why? So I'm originally from Brownsville, and it was always important to me just to help people. And through the course of my career, I had to figure out exactly how I wanted to help people. And I think what grounds me and sustains me is that, I'm listening first. So it's not, offering the help without asking, what is it that I can support you with? How can I support you? So really kind of getting to like the nitty gritty of the details and figuring out the what is and how and the whys and making sure that the person that I'm helping is a part of that process throughout every step of the way.
Thank you, Ionna.
I'm happy to go next. I'm Judge Linda Cooke. I'm the presiding judge at the Boulder Municipal Court in Boulder, Colorado. The why, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing in this space is because it's been clear to me for many years in the system that traditional justice system approach doesn't work for so many people with the issues and the sort of underlying things that are bringing people to court. And what I saw was the opportunity in my own realm to make improvements. And so I did. And so that was why I done that. What has sustained me? That's a really good question. For me, I was ahead of the curve of other courts, municipal courts in Colorado. And so I had to look elsewhere for peers and mentors and role models and ideas, and connecting initially through the Community Justice Summit in 2016, hosted by the Center for Court Innovation, but the connections I've made there, staying in touch with those folks, those are the people who inspire me, who have given me so many great ideas that I've been able to borrow from. That's what keeps me going.
Excellent. Thank you, Judge Cooke.
I guess I'm the last one. My name is Mankinta Holloway. I have the pleasure of serving as one of the court administrators for the City of Birmingham Municipal Court. The why I chose to go into criminal justice is simply stated that I wanted to make a difference in my community. Ironically, I found myself in the heart of where civil rights started in the city of Birmingham. And we have so much disparity there still, and we still have to do so many different things. But the other why is because I believe in people. And how I do that is by being a servant first. You have to always remember that you could be on the other side of the desk, you could be on the other side of the bench. And not only could you be on the other side, but you may have family members and people that you see every day in those spaces, and who can help champion change is the people who make the decisions. And so I made sure that I found place at the table so I can be a voice of people who couldn't be a voice to themselves. So thank you for this opportunity to serve.
Well, thank you all so much for your intros. And Mankinta, you mentioned being a servant. I love that framing and how we show up in our work, right? We are here in service. So My first question is this. We know a lot of what we've been doing hasn't worked, right? We understand because I always say we try to work ourselves out of a job. I've been doing this job for close to 20 years and I'm still working. It doesn't look like I'm going anywhere, right? But it's challenging, right? Being people-centered. How do you being people-centered while also holding accountability and the individual's humanity at the same time? So holding both of those is not easy, right? So in your respective sites, jurisdictions, and your teams, how do you balance that? How do you navigate that? Like accountability and individual's humanity and the complexities of that. So how do you all manage that?
So I'll go ahead and start. The way we managed that was we started a community court here in Boulder, and the primary population that we're serving are people who are unhoused. And the way we started the court was really a function of COVID. We received grant money in 2020, and we didn't have a physical space where we could engage with people. So we decided to do court out in the community. We went to places where people were already gathering because there were services provided to them. We started at a church where every week they were providing a free hot meal and a clothing closet. And our homeless navigators and our court prosecutors went out to that site, set up their tablets. And I was at the courthouse, just like I am now virtually. And we conducted court from that site. So we brought court to those folks rather than asking them to come to us. And we were meeting them where they were at in the spaces they were already inhabiting. And the other way that we've done this is with the accountability piece is we're dealing with low-level offenses. We're dealing with things like camping and trespass and so forth. But instead of asking for community service, for instance, or imposing jail time, which of course doesn't change behavior at all if you're unhoused, we asked somebody to do something that would be beneficial to them and also then beneficial to us as a community. So if you apply for a replacement Social Security card, if you apply for a state ID, there's a whole list of things, but we will then dismiss your case. And so that's where the accountability is happening.
I'll add to that. I think that's a great point that Judge Cooke made when you talk about going out into the community and being involved with the people and going to them. We have to remember that these are customers. At the end of the day, they come to us, they get these things, but we still have a process that we have to go through. And how we do it at Municipal Court in Birmingham, Alabama is our motto is where accountability meets compassion, because at some point they run into each other. And how we've done that at Birmingham is creating the same kind of template that Judge Cooke has mentioned, is creating these specialty courts that focuses on not the group of people, but the individual. And how do we tailor what we need to give you, the justice that's needed to be served specifically to that individual. And once you do that, you tap into what's really going on with them, the root causes, what resources are needed, because we have licensed social workers on staff. We felt that was important. How do we get resources to you? How does the court not stay disconnected, but how does the court connect to community to serve the community and make things better?
Thank you, Mankinta. Ionna?
Yeah, thank you all. The Brownsville Community Justice Center is not a community court. We consider ourselves to be a community-based organization. And when we first started out, we worked primarily with young people who were impacted by the criminal justice system. So, maybe they were jumping a turnstile or, just coming home from prison. And we started out by providing workforce development skills, right? Everybody need a job. So helping young people write a resume, tie a tie, think through soft skill development, but, quickly realize that, through our individual services and working really closely individually with each young person, that we were hearing common themes around spaces and how access to resources or access to, employment was an issue because young people were having issues traveling to a space. So, I think the accountability piece for us is that we quickly had to evolve, how we were implementing our programs and to also think about, how space and how the built environment plays a role in safety for our young people to even access resources and services. So in that, we started to just research and, talk to people about the built environment and stumbled upon this theory called crime prevention through environmental design. Because our young people were just asking us, like, how do you want me to get to these places if I can't travel, or if I'm coming here and I get robbed on the way, or I'm getting jumped on the way, like, help us figure out these spatial issues. And so we did just that. And when we stumbled upon that theory, SEPTED, we started to think about, how the built environment plays a role in unsafe environments. And what our young people can do with that information and how they can make changes in those spaces to, do some interventions that, promote safety or promote pro-social activities in those spaces. So the accountability piece is just, again, like listening and making sure that, we are being resourceful and taking the information that we get and being solution oriented and being innovative. And trying out new different approaches to make sure that, if we're, supporting a young person through whatever it is, their life's journey, that we're also listening, taking in the information and helping them to, make decisions about the community in which they live in and how they want to, envision it or, for better. So I would say, those are some of the ways that we've done that.
This is excellent. Thank you all so much. I hear a number of things, like folks, Judge Cooke, you're talking about bringing the court into the community and serving folks, right? Ionna, you're talking about how are we thinking outside the box when it comes to our work, not being on this like assembly line of our services, right? So I always think of this. I've been framing the work we do from services versus resources. Services is that like assembly line of, oh, here's the services, you do this 8-week intervention and everything will be good, you get a certificate and you're on your way. It sounds like you all aren't thinking that way, right? You think more about in this frame of resources. How do I give power and autonomy back to the folks that are actually furthest along online when it comes to being marginalized? And that's amazing. But my question to you all though is, can you share an example of like your people-centered philosophy and how you do your work? Like, what is your philosophy that grounds you all into this so you can continue doing the work and sustaining yourselves and your programs? I would love to hear a little more from you, Ionna, about what's your philosophy that grounds you in people-centered work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the example that I gave earlier about, how we hold ourselves accountable, I think, one of the ways that we ground ourselves in people-centered work is we don't hold that information to ourselves. Again, when we learned about this theory called crime prevention through environmental design, we quickly shared it with our young people and said, I think this is what you're going through. And, here's a theory that says that, if you take a look at the built environment and you make, changes to it, or you reinvest in it, or you beautify the space, you bring more people to that space, you create more positive pro-social activities that are happening in that space, that could deter violence or crime from happening in those spaces. So, sharing that information with the young people and saying, okay, so now that we have this, like, what should we do? Like, what do we do about that? And, letting them come up with the plan. Like, what is the plan from here? What do you envision in these spaces that are, hot spots for crime? And I'll give a prime example. One of the spaces is on a commercial corridor in Brownsville called Belmont Avenue. And this commercial corridor, had been very vibrant once upon a time. It was bustling. It was, had the entrepreneurial spirit. And over the years, there's been a lot of disinvestment. Businesses have been leaving, closing down early, and really was contributing to, violence happening in that space. And our young people will talk about this corridor as a space of tension, where they wouldn't go because, they wouldn't get caught lacking in that space. That's where the beef would happen or the violence would happen. And so, they really exhausted their efforts in trying to figure out how to bring back the story of Belmont Avenue being once vibrant and housing this entrepreneurial spirit. And the first thing that they did was just really started out with a cleanup day. Like, let's just clean it up, let's make it look beautiful again. Let's remove the graffiti. And invited over 200 residents and young people and stakeholders to support in that. And during that process, you know, they were talking to the business owners and also kind of inquiring about, you know, entrepreneurship and what are the, you know, the wins and the successes of an entrepreneur, because they also had entrepreneurial goals as well. So them doing the work and kind of being a part of that process and seeing that they themselves could possibly become an entrepreneur and have space in their own community was a part of that. And, you know, I think, you know, that's the people-centered philosophy, you know, that it's about, you know, having the community members decide and make decisions on what's best for their community, and being part of the process, and really the CBO being seen as a resource or a connector or convener of the people who are supposed to be doing their jobs, right? We were, you know, in New York, you have Department of Transportation or Small Business Services who are, you know, providing resources to the streets and to the small businesses and bringing those people to the table, you know, to have conversations with community residents about what the needs are in their community. So that's what we did. You know, we were just the connector and the convener, but really making sure that, you know, the young people who were having these issues were also the ones who are very much a part of the solutions. And, you know, they always say, you know, if you know where the issues are, you absolutely have the answers to how to create solutions in your own community. So it all started and ends with them.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm happy to jump in next on this question. So a couple of different ways. When we're out in the community doing court, we're not calling a traditional docket, you know, so-and-so's next. Instead, our navigators are identifying who we need to speak with next. So there's already sort of a preliminary conversation that has occurred. So, and it's very informal. So when I start seeing them over Zoom, you know, I'm saying, good morning, Mr. or Ms. So-and-so. I ask them if I'm pronouncing their name correctly. I say, how are you today? If the weather's bad, I might be saying, are you managing to stay warm? And I thank them for participating in court this way. And then we jump into the kind of the substance of what we need to accomplish. But it's all very, very informal. And because our model is a diversionary model, I don't have to go through some of the traditional advisement of rights and so forth that just can create a barrier in and of itself psychologically. And I always try to find something to say to each person. Yesterday, I was commenting on something. He had this awesome beard, and I complimented him on his beard. But even with that, we try to bring that into when we are seeing people in court at the courthouse. It's different, but we still try to make it very people-centered. So when people arrive for court, this particular population, again, our navigators are greeting them. They're often offering them a bottle of water or a cup of coffee because they may not have had that yet today. They know that they often have trouble charging their cell phones or other devices. So they say, you might want to sit here. There's an outlet right here where you can do that. And we also have some food in the back office. So if they seem to really be in need of that, we can offer them that as well. And so, you know, where I'm really going with that is these are all sort of components of procedural fairness. And it's just how do you bring those in with a particular population that you're working with and what would feel procedurally fair to them. One of the things that I would recommend that to people, if it's appropriate for them, is our entire staff did mental health first aid training. It's a day-long training. You can probably have it administered at low cost or for free by a local mental health provider. But the skills that our staff had acquired from doing that training was also really helpful in helping them to be people-centered, whether somebody's in crisis or not.
Thank you, Judge Cooke. Mankinta?
Yeah, staying grounded. I think both share great points. The way we try to do it at Birmingham is looking at the point of we're not looking at how much we're collecting, but who we're impacting, and how we've done it in the past by, I think it was said earlier, talking about listening. We saw in the state of Alabama, and I'm sure across the country, that everybody has driver's license issues. And so you have to pay attention to who's in front of you now And so what we created in that space was a program called Renew. And our Renew program focused on sitting down with each individual who had driver's license issues, walking it down to see what was the thing that was impacting them. And we found that it wasn't just money or them being able to pay the fee. It was that a lot of them were illiterate. They had literacy issues. And so we went to the DMV in the state of Alabama and got permission to teach the class orally and help have them report that. And it changed the dynamic. And so we're looking at how many people are getting their driver's license. So over the last 5 years, we've seen about 1,000 people get their driver's license restored. Some people had never had a driver's license in the first place. But in that same space, we partnered, because of the literacy issue, we partnered with a local junior college to establish an adult ed program to help people get reconnected, reestablished. And we also look at that and how we look at our community service, because now we know the more we pour into the person, the better the community will be impacted. Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. So we're actually breathing back life into the community, one person at a time. And so as we win, they become our navigators in the community. They become our champions in the community, saying, this is not court as usual. This is the new wave of how we treat people, because we know that treating people right is just right. And so that's what we try to focus on.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, I'm actually moved by a lot of what you're all saying. And I think, Mankinta, you mentioned the issue of folks having issues with obtaining their driver's licenses. And that was a presenting issue, but peeling back the layers, you've discovered another issue, another challenge. And I feel like that's the complexities of being people-centered in our humanity. We're layered in our thing, in everything we do. And for us as practitioners, it requires a lot of planning and like different ways of planning, not like A, B, C, D down the line, but what does planning look like for y'all when it comes to creating these people-centered practices? And how do you maintain that people-centering in it? So I'd love Mankinta, you to dive a little deeper into this part, like the planning. How does this come about? And how do you make sure you stay in that lane of being people-centered?
Oh man, planning is rich, specifically in government. You have to figure out, one, the idea is great, but sustainability is greater. And so we start from sustainability first. How can we sustain this program? Because the people have told us that it's needed. People have told us through the actions that they want it. We've seen us try it in spaces. And what we're done now, we're working on a program now on conflict resolution. And we program some of the middle schools and throughout the community to focus on what these things called CBT, cognitive-based training or therapy, because we know most of the people's issues is not behavior, it's thought. And so how do you put the thought on the table and talk through the thought? And so once we get a win, we celebrate the win, not just with them, we celebrate the win through the city outlets. Now we got the community engaged. And so now once you get it into the fiber of the community, people can't live without it. It's no different than anything else. Once you start using your cell phones, you can't go without your cell phone. It's almost like, where is it? And so what we try to do is make things that we create so much of a habit that people can't do without it. And so even with our mentorships and all we do in those things, we try to do that. And that's how we create sustainability.
Ionna?
Yeah, I think those are really great points, Mankinta. And in Brownsville, planning is extremely important, especially when you're thinking about people's lives and their individual goals, what their goals are for their community. When we talk about the built environment, we're talking about building things, breaking things up and tearing things down and starting things new. Planning is at the forefront of that, and really you really never really know what you're getting yourself into when you ask a person a question, and when they answer the question, you have to come prepared with some stuff. So I think for our youth development programs, we do a lot of different types of skill building programs with our young people in Brownsville. But how do we even get there? Like, how do we even get to developing that piece of it? And I would say, again, I can't stress enough how listening is extremely important, but going to the places where people are and asking them those questions. What are your interests? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? And taking that information back, to the team, and starting with the whiteboard and saying, we've heard these X amount of interests. Young people want to learn about music production. They want to learn about fashion. They want to learn about entrepreneurship. Okay, well, we don't have those skills here at BCJC. So where do we get those? Like, how do we get those skilled professionals to be able to come in and train those young people on what to do? So we work with our program managers and program coordinators to source that talent, right? If we don't have it, we have to find it. And sometimes this requires us to even think about fundraising and how are we funding for these things, and working with our grant writers and development team to be able to, fund these new programs. But we also make sure that in the process of planning, we think about like barriers to success and how, young people are still on their life's journey and things can come up. So we try to be flexible with scheduling and take all of the things into account that young people are going through when we're developing these types of programs. So we work really closely with work coaches and our social workers to understand and unpack like a young person's journey, and, lay out what a curriculum could possibly be and an outline for the program. And then, we execute, we invite those same young people and say, hey, you said you were interested in this. Here's the program. And work really closely with them, provide them with a work coach, and that work coach, works through any issues or barriers that may prevent them from, being engaged fully in that skill building training program. So I think it's just, that's how we plan, when we're talking about program development or we're talking about the built environment. It always starts with asking questions, doing the research, bringing in the experts, and then executing.
Thank you, Ionna.
So I'm going to build on what people have said here already, but I want to talk about planning kind of at the micro level and at the macro level. So on the micro level, when I have an unhoused individual in front of me with a community court case, the planning is that the navigator is speaking with the individual to say, hey, what have you already done? Have you gone through the coordinated entry process? Do you have this document or that document? And they're kind of figuring out in a very specific way for that individual, what's the resource that you most need next? For somebody, it might be some form of identification. For somebody, it might be family reunification, and they're not looking to stay in the Boulder community and get housed. I asked somebody, this is the first time I had this answer the other day. I said, what do you need? And he said, I have a heart condition and I need a cardiac alert dog. Well, I'm not going to be able to provide him that, but it alerted me to the fact that maybe that's another service provider connection that we should explore. So for an individual case, we're engaging with that individual. We keep track of what we've already done with folks, so we can say, okay, here's sort of the next step. And sort of overarching for people who are unhoused is most of them do want housing, and we work very closely with the service provision systems that get people into housing. So we're helping to get them ready, document ready for housing and ready in other ways. At the macro level for planning, a couple of suggestions. So first of all, if you can have an advisory council comprised of the people that you're serving so that their voices are heard in your program design, I think that's really critical. And so we have a homeless advisory council, and I completely stole this from Austin, Texas, and their community court. But it is really helpful because we went to them, for instance, with what should we do for videos that would help people as they move into housing and they're getting accustomed to living indoors instead of outdoors. And one of the people there said, well, even before that, you could create a video on how to use a cell phone. They all get free cell phones, but they don't really know how to use them. And, maybe they can do the basic function of making a call, but they don't know how to use the calendar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. So I do think it's really important to include perspectives from the population that you will be serving. We also heard a lot today about sustainability. We are lucky to be the recipients of a BGA Community Court grant, but that only lasts for a couple of years. So if you can demonstrate the success of your program, then you need to go to your funders and build in those funding streams so that it remains sustainable. And if it's possible, this doesn't always work for all programming, but if you can build it into your statutory framework, that's also helpful, because once something's, for us, we are going to be bringing forth an ordinance that establishes the community court. And once it's there, it's not that it couldn't be repealed, but it gives it some added legitimacy and sustainability. And so think about that as a possibility as well.
Excellent. Thank you all. I'm hearing a lot of planning, being intentional in planning, but also giving space for flexibility and innovation, and understanding that there's a certain sense of humility in the planning, right? Like Judge Cooke, you mentioned the cardiac dog, and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that existed. Let me explore this as an additional thing to add to the toolkit, and which is amazing, which is great. And I think that speaks to people-centered practices. We're understanding that we're not the experts, and we're adding to our toolkit every day, which goes to my next question, right? We have 3 people here on the panel who are really prioritizing being people-centered from their respective vantage points. We have a bunch of folks that are here watching this panel that are committed to being people-centered, but it's not enough of us. So when it comes to building out your teams, your groups of folks that are going to be doing work with you, what are some of the things that you look for when building out your teams, your staff? What are you prioritizing when it comes to folks that you bring in that will follow that same culture of being people-centered? And actually, I'd love to hear you start us off, Judge Cooke.
Yes, thank you. So what I would say is, first of all, we had to figure out, not in terms of the personnel that we hired, but what were the positions that we needed? What was missing? And when we started using alternative sanctions like get a state ID or go keep a mental health appointment or something like that, we didn't have people that could actually help walk the path and assist people in accomplishing those goals. And so they weren't often met, right? So we quickly identified that if we had a homeless navigator that could go with people to these different sites, help them wait patiently in a lobby, help them keep them calm and de-escalated while interacting with the folks that they were going to interact with, that was going to help us overcome a lot of the barriers that people had in succeeding in accomplishing those tasks. And so the first thing I would say is figure out what is it that you need to overcome barriers and to get the work done that you want to get done. When you then hire or train the staff, what's important is that you're, being very value-centered, and helping people understand this is the population that we're dealing with. This is the kind of work that we're going to do. Even back at the hiring phase, is this something you're comfortable with? If you're not comfortable, if you're going to apply to be a homeless navigator and you're not comfortable going out into the community and interacting with the unhoused on their terms and in their spaces, then this probably isn't the right job for you. This isn't a job where they come into the office and sit with you, right? So it's really looking for people who can do the work in the value-driven way that you envision.
Thank you, Judge Cooke.
I'll chime in next. I think Judge Cooke is right. I think going back to a point she made previously, and I think it's been said over and over again, is the fact that we have to be people-centered. And we have to realize who our customers are. And how you do that is why I think Ionna said the best, you gotta listen to them. And so I think Judge Cooke said when she was talking to a person, she knew what she didn't know and what she couldn't do, and she made an adjustment. In this framework of justice that we're doing right now, we got to make sure that we can pivot based on what's in front of us. And so how we build our teams is identifying what's missing. And we know that it's not on the same scale that we've been looking at. You don't just have probation officers. Now we're talking about navigators. You don't just have probation officer or court personnel. You have social workers. What do we need to add to what we already have to enhance how we serve people? And sometimes the best way to do that is creating new opportunity, new jobs, and bringing the justice system as a whole to another platform. And what we found at Municipal Court is we don't have every job yet. Every title hadn't been created, hadn't been established, and we got to be okay with that. And when we get to that space, what do we then do in planning out? How do we bring that on board? Because we want to make sure that we're continuing to give people adequate service at the next level, at the next point, because everybody that we're going to run into don't have the same problems that we dealt with 5 years ago. These are new people with different problems because we're people-centric. And so I think that's what you have to think about all the time. I always think about flexibility. We're not pens anymore, we're pencils. What do you have to erase? Start over because we're missing it. And be okay with telling yourself and admitting that we don't know. And so we're asking the community, what do you want? What do you need? How can we serve you better? And once you get that information, then go to the stakeholders and say, this is what the people are saying we need to get better results out of what we want. We got to make some adjustments. And so I think that's how you start looking at staff and building teams.
Thank you, Mankinta. Ionna?
Yeah, totally agree on those pieces. I would also add that, you know, I'm from Brownsville, you know, I'm from the community in which I'm in service of. And I think that is also a very important piece to when thinking about staffing. It's just that the staff also reflect the community in which you are in service of, right? They're culturally competent. You know, BCJC, we're talking about working with young people who are Black and brown, who are, you know, in one of the most disadvantaged, just all systems neglected community. And it's important for those young people to see people who look like them, you know, doing the work so that they too can aspire to, you know, wanting to be a change agent and wanting to, you know, put forth, you know, positive activities in their community. And that takes a lot, you know. I think, you know, when we get staff members who are passionate and committed to the work and wanting to be here, you know, we have to be responsible for those, you know, those staff members and think about, you know, what do they need? Like, do they need training? Are there growth opportunities for them? Like, how can we invest more into the staff? Because this is hard work, you know, and sometimes it's all day, all night work. And I think that that's important too, is just how are we taking care of the people that are taking care of the people? And you know, we have to think about those things. So, you know, I would just implore everyone to think about, you know, the communities that they're serving, and making sure that there are people who look like the people in the communities that they're serving on staff, and that we're investing in those people by providing them growth opportunities and training, but also making sure that they're taking care of themselves by providing, you know, mental health and self-care, access to self-care as well. So.
Thank you all. It's really interesting. This is a great way to go into my final question, actually. My first statement, I've mentioned that what we've done hasn't been working kind of collectively. But it's true, we have made significant strides in our work based on just sharing what you all are doing, right? But part of the change we're looking to make, I wonder how much of it requires reconciliation with our past, right? Our past harms that we've caused as not as individuals, but as like vehicles of the systems that were here to help folks. So how do we move forward while also acknowledging that past? And Mankinta, I'd love to hear what y'all are doing in Birmingham about that, or any thoughts you have on that.
I think the first thing is being honest with the fact that we've missed it. We haven't always been people-centric. A lot of times we've been pushed to be collection-centric, outcome-centric, and it's turned into no help to the people. We haven't really always looked at how we measure people getting better. And I think what we've done in Birmingham is focus more on what are the steps that make you better? What does community service look like? What does getting a job look like? How do we evaluate your progress? And how do we celebrate you in the steps you make? And so I learned in doing probation work that we used to always say, one of the conditions from a judge would be, I need you to get your GED within a year. But when you dropped out of school in the 8th grade, you're 52. That's impossible to do. And so I think sometimes what we've done in the past is we put weight on people and expectations on them that they couldn't meet. And so we got to own that. And I've seen judges be mindful of that around the globe and surrounding people ourselves with people who can be transparent and tell us, you know, you may want to consider judge this thing, or probation officer, you may want to consider this thing, or court staff or personnel, you want to consider this, because we don't always consider what it takes to get it. When all of us took our jobs, there's an orientation that takes place. And then in that orientation, they give you a SOP or some level of training to navigate through where you work. And we forget that we invite all these people in and we expect them to know it. And we become inadvertently insensitive to that. And I think the trainings that we do on cultural bias and creating sensitivity space, I think being mindful of who we are and where we come from, because we progressed on the job, people have to do the same thing, and it takes time. And it's almost like when I do something wrong on the job, I want sympathy or empathy. But when a client of mine would do something wrong, I would want to hold them accountable. And so we got to be balanced in that space. But I think going back to the initial point, I think the first thing we have to do is just be honest. Listen, we missed it. People miss it. And so what we're going to do on this journey, we're going to do it together. What do you need from me? I'm going to let you know what we need from you. And I'm not just going to let you know what we need. I'm going to help you walk that out. Or I'm going to connect you to somebody who helps you walk that out. And we're going to give you time to do that. And we're going to champion you along the way. And I think that changes the relationship because it becomes personal instead of authoritative. And I think that's what we've tried to do in Birmingham, to change the culture of how we engage people.
Thank you, Mankinta. Ionna.
Oh man, I think, Mankinta is spot on. I feel like honesty is the best place to start. And, when we're talking about, working with young people who are impacted by criminal justice system, whether they were the ones committing the harm or, victims of it, I think it's always important to start out with, understanding why they're in this position in the first place. And, we talked about, the built environment and how that also plays a role into, why one picks up a gun in the first place. It's, they're a product of their society, of their environment. And there are powers that be that, contribute to, systems neglect and the reason why our communities continue to be disadvantaged. So I think it starts there. And, I can't tell you, no lie, every time we talk about this part with our young people, it turns on a light bulb. It's like, you mean, it isn't me? I'm not the one. It's bigger than me. And they start to think about, how they contribute to, their environments in the society and use their voice to advocate for, better policies, better practices, better systems within their communities. So it starts there. I mean, we have to acknowledge, why young people in Black and Brown communities are, at the highest of, being justice involved, and what's those reasonings, and, present that information to our young people so they can say that this doesn't start with you. It didn't start with you, but we can figure out what we need to do about it. So it starts there.
Thank you, Ionna. Judge Cooke?
Yeah, so I'm going to echo what Mankinta and Ionna have already said. Mankinta a couple times stressed honesty. And I would say that we come at this from a position of we have to build trust. By building trust, we are acknowledging that what we've done before did not build trust and frankly created distrust. And so we're starting from ground zero to build trust with the individuals that we're working with. And it's slow. Some people understandably are not very trusting of the justice system, and they're not necessarily trusting that we're going to dismiss their case if they go see the street medicine doctor over at the next table at the church on Thursday mornings. But we, step by step, day by day, we build trust. And what that has engendered for us is that when people come back to us, and they do, because your camping cases aren't going to go away just because you did one thing at community court. You're going to keep getting those cases until you have housing. And so we're going to keep working with you. But they are willing to go deeper with us. And for instance, one of our navigators frequently goes to court with people on other court cases that they may have in county court or district court. And oh my gosh, in one case when they went, the prosecutor asked for them to be arrested and put in custody. And the judge said, well, they're working with the community court navigators. I don't think we need to do that. We'll talk about building trust, so I think, building that trust on the one-on-one basis is really key to going a long way towards acknowledging that what we did before wasn't working. But I also think we need to do more than that. And Mankinta talked about outcomes. I think we have to, in our own environments, and if possible beyond those, is reframe goals and metrics. And I was at City Council recently where we were getting funded for community court on an ongoing basis, not just from the grant. What metrics are you going to look like? And I responded with some of the things that Mankinta has talked about, outcomes. And it was so nice to have them validate that and reflect that was appropriate, because I was expecting that I was going to get pushback and they were going to say, well, what about recidivism? That's not the right metric for many of the populations that we're working with and the kinds of cases that they're dealing with, because it's going to be a journey for them. So let's look at what are the metrics that are appropriate for the work that we're doing and show that we're successful using those goals and metrics.
Wow, excellent. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk about amazing work you're all doing in your respective cities.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kenton, Kirby. Thanks for attending and watching our video of our previous conversation. I just want to say that a couple things really stuck out for me. I really want to highlight some of the stuff that was being said around like reckoning with our past, right? Acknowledging that we can't move forward in being people-centered without acknowledging that we have to look back at our past and how we keep our work centered on people. And because if we can look back in the past and reflect and look at that as lessons learned, the hope is that we don't actually repeat those same patterns. And another thing came up, we're also investing in staff. And investment in staff is also giving folks a livable wage, right? Like we say, a lot of our folks are doing this work for passion and they're committed to the work, but we also got to make sure that our force of folks that are doing this great work can sustain in it, can have a livable wage and be sustained in their passion. So those are things that really stuck out for me. And I just, I'm really excited that I've reconvened and reconnected with this amazing panel again. And I would love any thoughts, concerns, things that came up for you all since our last conversation and the viewing of this video. Mankinta, you said some really interesting things so I'd love to bring you in.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great having the discussion. I think one of the major things that I learned in this discussion was us talking about the importance and value of people, and making sure that we put people in the center of everything that we do, being engaged and asking them what their needs are versus assuming that we know everything because of what we're dealing with. And so it was very rich to have that conversation, that full dialogue. and just looking forward to how we can continue to build on what we've talked about going forward.
Thank you, Mankinta. And also, we are taking questions live. If any of the attendees want to ask us questions, put them in the chat. But Judge Cooke, anything that's still spinning in your head since we last met? It's good to see you again.
It's nice to see all of you again, and thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this amazing conference. In one of the earlier sessions today, I heard a couple of different people talk about the number one thing for safety is affordable housing. And if we tackle homelessness, we tackle criminal justice system issues. And because, as you all heard, the population that we're serving with our community court are unhoused. It was really amazing for people to be drawing that direct connection between those things. And I think, so that's the focus of our court. That's the people-centered practice that we're engaging in and trying to help people get to that point. But I also think it's relevant to when you're working with stakeholders who may not necessarily appreciate people-centered practices and might think that that's sort of a, too soft an approach, especially when you're dealing with criminal justice system participants. And so I think that being able to draw connect the dots between some of these things help them buy into, because the people-centered practices need to be not just about the people that we're serving, but about our community and how they're perceiving what we're doing with the people that we're serving. Because if we don't have buy-in from them, we're missing a big part of the puzzle.
Awesome. Thank you, Judge Cooke. We do have a question in the chat, but I want to hear, Ionna, any thoughts or things that kind of resonate with you, and then we'll jump into the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kenton. And it's really great to be back with you, Mankinta and Judge Cooke. I'm super appreciative to be a part of this amazing opportunity to talk about people-centered practices and how we at the Brownsville Community Justice Center hold ourselves to that. There's nothing more that I can, say than everything that was already stated. I think it's extremely important that when you're working within communities and with communities, that you are continuously focusing on listening and being a resource, and really letting community members lead the way in which we provide services to them. And so, I think the conversation went extremely well in talking about that and talking about ways in which we do that, and even highlighted, some ways that we want to reconcile with, past. And I hope that, there are many questions that we can answer in the next segment of this.
So thank you all. So one of the questions came from the chat. It says, I'm wondering if you get any feedback from the victims of the crimes on how they feel about the work you're doing. So I'm wondering if you get any feedback from the victims of the crimes on how they feel about the work you're doing. Who would like to go first?
Mankinta, you got a big smile.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily get direct communication back from victims for the work that we do. We do, however, partner with one of our local providers, which is the YWCA. They actually have an advocate that comes to our court to support our victims who have issues that happen with them, and we stay connected with them. It's another thing that we're trying to do because we know victims are always concerned about fear, because it takes a lot of courage to reach out and say, I've been a victim. And so what we've been doing is partnering. We've had a grant recently that we achieved from ADECA in Alabama to create a space virtually for victims to go in and to even file their complaint on their perpetrator. And so our overall goal is always see how we can support the victims, but that is something I think that we could do a better job at. And so I'm grateful for that question. It gives us something to look forward to working to improve on.
All right. Thank you, Mankinta. Would anyone else like to answer that question? But I do have another question specifically for Judge Cooke, but Ionna, it sounds like you want to say something.
Yeah, really quickly. I just want to, note that unfortunately, a lot of the young people who are, contributing to crime have also been victims. And it started out with them, being a victim of crime, and wanting to protect themselves in a way. And so, when we have these conversations about, the onset of crime, we have to acknowledge that a lot of young people who are living in the community have either, witnessed crime or have been subjected to it themselves. And it creates this cycle. And one of the things that they want to work on is how to, prevent these things from happening. And so some of the feedback that we've gotten was, especially in regards to spaces, like how do we heal, these types of activities in these spaces, right? Because we pass them every time, and we walk by them where instances of crime has happened. And so we have to think about community healing and trauma, and how that also creates this cycle of violence in our communities. And so, we've done a lot of shooting responses. We've also done a lot of healing activations and introduced people to different types of healing modalities, whether that's meditation, whether that's Reiki, or even connected people to mental health resources to help them deal with those traumatic experiences.
Thank you, Ionna. And Judge Cooke, the specific questions for you. Do you get any pushback from ADAs or other law enforcement agencies?
I'm really fortunate. The answer to that is no. For us, our prosecutors are the city prosecutors. And in fact, they were the ones who had the idea to take this from a post-conviction program to a diversionary program and have cases dismissed instead of them having be guilty pleas with alternative sanctions. So we're very, very fortunate to have that buy-in. The local police department has a homeless outreach team, and they're very strong partners with what we're doing, and in particular work very closely with our homeless navigators. So again, we're not really operating in an environment where we're getting that kind of pushback. In addition, we're lucky because we're co-located in the Justice Center with the state and county courts for our local district. And our program has become well known, and we're now getting referrals from other components of the justice system that are in the building. They may have somebody that has a case with them, but may also have a case with us. So for instance, the district attorney's office will refer people to us, somebody who's in their mental health diversion program or whatever. So we're very fortunate in our local environment that we don't have that pushback.
All right. Thank you so much, Judge Cooke. Thank you, Ionna. Thank you, Mankinta, for your time, doing a recording, taking a few minutes to talk about some unsettled things, unfinished business. And thank you all for attending. So at this point, this concludes the session. So be well and enjoy the rest of the conference. All right. Be well, everyone.